If you are worried about hemorrhaging after birth, then hear me out for a moment because you might want to consider not doing forced pushing during the pushing stage of your birth. And I have a personal experience with that, but also if you Google that and look into it, you can find some research that's been done about how forced pushing can affect everything down there and cause hemorrhaging. Okay, so forced pushing, what I mean by that is, so usually what happens, and you've probably seen this on TV shows and stuff like that, is so it comes from like when a woman has an epidural, and they can't feel to push, okay? And so the doctor, the nurse, whoever, has to tell them when to push. And so it's forced pushing compared to allowing your body to tell you when to push, or allowing your body just to push your baby out, which is what happened in my fourth birth, okay? So, when you're forcing, you're bearing down, you're pushing, whether the baby's ready to come or not, just because you're 10 centimeters and just because they see on the screen that you're having a contraction. And so they'll count down from, I think it's usually like 10, and you'll be pushing that entire time, and you'll bear down with your chin to your chest and legs up, and you're forcing. That can cause damage down there, and it can also cause the hemorrhaging after. So, even in a natural birth situation, though, at the hospital, they'll still use that same technique or protocol whenever you start to push. So unless you go in with knowing that and knowing you're not going to do that, whether they're trying to, motivate you to do that or not, they'll still try. That's just what they know and what they do on a normal basis. So for my personal experience with that, I've had 4 births, okay? So my first birth was one with an epidural. So I had to do the forced pushing because I couldn't tell my body was doing anything. And so I had a 3rd-degree tear, and I hemorrhaged after that birth. And so I forced pushed for an entire hour. And that's like normal for a person who gets an epidural. And I was also induced through medications just because I might have a big baby, and my baby ended up being like 8 pounds, which was not a big baby. So, I hemorrhaged then, and it okay, obviously, but my second birth was at a birthing center, and I did the same thing. I thought that I was going to have a natural birth, not have that hemorrhaging experience, and that since it was a more natural experience with midwives, that they would tell me what to do, and it wouldn't be that same type of scenario. But it ended up similar. So I did the forced pushing again. I didn't know what I was doing. I did not allow my body to do the work. I was tense the entire time. I ended up feeling like I wanted to push. And so instead of just surrendering to that feeling, I was afraid of that feeling. And I got scared, and I just started pushing, like, oh my gosh, she's coming, I gotta push her out. And that was my, mindset in that. And so I was forcing her out. I was trying to forcefully push. And so every time I would feel like I needed to push, I would bear down and force. Okay. So she kind of got stuck because I guess forcing her out. And they ended up saying, well, if you don't hurry and get her out, then we're going to have to cut an episiotomy because her heart rate's starting to lower. So I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want anything to happen. So I started forcing really hard. And so she came out after a few pushes of me, like really trying to force her on my knees with no medications. And I hemorrhaged again, and I tore again. This time there was no episiotomy. The first time there was. Okay, so almost had to get a blood transfusion, like a few little points away. They count it by points. And so I did end up having to get one, but I did hemorrhage. So 3rd birth was a natural hospital birth. And I thought, okay, I learned from those other births, so I'm not going to do that this time. And my husband was my support. That was kind of what we went into it with, was that he was going to support me. I was going to have this wonderful natural birth experience. Everything was going to be different and better. So that's the preparation we did. We learned some relaxation techniques. We learned some breathing techniques. We learned some affirmations to say during that time, and that's basically how we prepared. So went to have the birth, and everything kind of went out the window. We couldn't really remember anything. I couldn't relax. I felt like I just could not relax. And so when the pushing feeling came, the hospital wouldn't allow me. So they had like a birth tub, and they would let you labor in it, but they would not let you give birth in it. So I had to get out. I was managing some of my pain that I was feeling with the birth tub, right? So then when I got out and got onto the bed, there was no one directing me in like a position to get into. And so I was just on my hands, or on my knees, with my hands on my knees, and bearing down with my chin into my chest, and just bearing down, trying everything to get her out because I was in so much pain. I couldn't relax at all. I was scared of what was happening, still feeling fear, even though I thought I was prepared before I went into that. And no one was helping me. Like no one was telling me anything, except the nurses were still in that mindset of forced pushing. And so they were still saying, okay, you're having a contraction, putting their hand on my belly and saying, you're having a contraction, you can push now, and counting down. And I was in such a like state of fear, and like, I don't know what to do. She's not coming out. What's going on? I'm in so much pain that I just went along with it. And I was doing that forceful pushing again. And although my body was doing a lot of the work and I could feel that, I was still afraid of what was happening, and in so much pain and tension and stress. And then I had the doctor at that time putting his fingers up me, trying to loosen the area up without my consent, which was making everything worse too. And then later I read that that can cause hemorrhaging too, when they're doing that to you for no reason, and the baby wasn't in distress or anything, and without consent. So I hemorrhaged after that birth, my worst hemorrhage, and I came very close to passing out. The room was spinning. I couldn't hold my baby, and it was not good. And I'm not saying this out of fear. I'm saying this because there's another option. There's another way of doing this where you don't have to hemorrhage, and you don't have to be kind of forced into hemorrhaging. And you don't realize that these interventions, these things that they call protocol, can cause hemorrhaging, can cause these further interventions. Okay, so they had to pump me up with Pitocin to get this hemorrhaging to stop every time. And I didn't want any of that. And so if I hadn't done that forceful pushing, I really believe that was the difference for me. And so it's worth looking into for yourself, because my fourth birth with my baby Eden was at home. And I'm not saying that you have to give birth at home to have a beautiful, wonderful experience. But for my personal experience, I was at home. I was very relaxed. I went into it with different tools. Okay. I went into it knowing I wanted to have a supernatural birth, which there is a difference between supernatural and just natural birth. And I've done a video on that you can go back and find. But I also teach this. I teach you how to have a supernatural birth that can even be pain-free. Okay, so if you want more information on how to do that, then comment or DM me birth, and I will send that to you. Okay, send you more information. But my fourth birth, no hemorrhaging. And I don't believe it was coincidence. It was stress-free. No one was telling me what to do at all. No one was questioning me. No one was like counting down for me to force my baby out. I wasn't in fear and doubt like with the other ones. I felt in control, and I felt like I knew what was going on, like even though I really didn't. And so now I have doula training, but I didn't then. And so like I know a lot more now, so this goes to just say to you that you don't have to know it all. You don't have to know all the positions. You don't have to know anything, because this happened for me and I still didn't fully understand birth and, all of that. Okay, so, and what was going on in my body at the time. With my fourth birth, I was so comfortable. I sat in the birth pool. I went into it with some more strategies and especially a lot of mindset shifts and changes from my other births. And I went into it feeling confident and empowered and knowing that I was going to have this beautiful birth no matter what. Okay. So, I sat in the birth tub for a while. I did not feel pain. I felt a lot of pressure, which did cause a little bit of fear because I was like, wow, this is happening. Like, you know, it's just a feeling that's indescribable, but there was no pain. So I was relaxed. I was surrendering. I was deeply surrendering to everything that was going on. No pain. And then when the baby came, I had very minimal tearing. And I think that was because whenever I started, I wasn't expecting my body to do so much work for me because all of a sudden she was between my legs. And this wasn't just because this was a fourth birth, okay? My third birth was extremely painful and difficult and hard. And so it wasn't just like, oh, well, it was just because it's your fourth birth and your body's used to this. That's not how it works. You can go through many, 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 many births and never have this experience of having pain-free supernatural birth unless you're preparing for it and intentional about it. Okay, so she was all of a sudden between my legs. And so I was like, I freaked out a little bit and pushed when my body was actually pushing her out for me. And so I believe that caused that little tear because I did feel a little bit of fear and pushed. And she was right out. And I did not feel a ring of fire. I didn't feel any pain. I can teach you how to do this too. But so the whole point of this is I did not hemorrhage. So what was the difference for me? I did no forceful pushing. And I had no one trying to force me to push. I had no one trying to stick their fingers in me without my consent or even with consent. I had no one saying that you have to be checked. I have to check you for dilation, all those things. No one messed with me at all. Okay, so you can do your own research about that and find, dig into it and make sure it's not all just completely biased from the hospital. I mean, of course, they're going to say what they're doing is fine and doesn't cause any interventions and stuff. But that's just something to think about. You don't have to do that forceful pushing. If you go into it knowing what to expect, even at a hospital, you don't have to have the home birth for this to be, for this to work. You can do it in the hospital too. Supernatural, pain-free birth works in the hospital, at home, birthing center, wherever you have your baby. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to do this. If you want to have a pain-free, supernatural, meaning through God, through His abilities, all centered around God and what He has for us in birth, in labor, in delivery, and pregnancy, then comment or DM me the word birth, and I will send you more information on how I can help you to get to this point. Because I know for me, this didn't just happen. I didn't just say a prayer, Lord, I want my birth to be wonderful. I said those prayers. There's a little bit more to it than just saying that. There's strategy, there's mindset shifts, there's things that you just don't just know, and no one's really teaching us. Okay, and so after a lot of research, digging into this, having terrible experiences myself, that's when I came across this, developed these things for myself. They worked, and now I'm teaching others how to do the same. So if you have any questions, you can post those questions below or reach out to me.